Hello YouTube and fellow Star Wars collectors! On this episode of Toys Are the Way, we will be taking a look at my custom Ithorian Hammerhead figure, as well as the behind the scenes process of making this custom. If you're new to the channel or a fan of Star Wars collecting, be sure to smash a like on this video, remember to subscribe, and make sure to ring that bell to stay notified. So as you can see, I have two new additions to the collection, and these alien figures will fit well into my spaceport town and diorama. With every addition and expansion to my collection room, I'm always on the lookout for ways to add more aliens and background characters to my displays. And fortunately, Scoundrel stock has been a fantastic resource in doing so. These 3D printed heads are amazing, and I will definitely leave a link below, allowing you to create custom characters like this as well. But with that being said, let's take a closer look at this figure and the process behind making it. After my first Ithorian custom a little while back, I've been very motivated to make more of these Star Wars aliens. Shortly after that initial custom, I was inspired by a Kenner version that Mr. Steve Evans shared on his Instagram page. Very cool stuff, and I highly recommend checking that out. But as a result, I instantly knew I wanted to make my own version of this flight-suited Ithorian. Here you can see the 3D printed parts provided by Scoundrel stock. We have this excellent Ithorian head sculpt with a voice box as seen in the Clone Wars and Book of Boba Fett. Additionally, there is a classic version with no voice box, and this is more reminiscent of the character Hammerhead, who we see in the Mos Eisley Cantina. Taking a look at my previous custom, you can get an idea how these parts will all come together and create this bounty hunter figure, adding more variety to my photography and shelf displays. There are two leg options included with the set. A large base at the knee and a narrow version as well. The arms are an excellent addition when trying to achieve the look of this alien. The only setback is there's no wrist articulation. We have a spare scarf from the Vintage Collection quill and some extra arms provided by Marauders to lengthen and rebuild the limbs. This older Saga Collection Bossk figure requires us to thicken the pegs in order to achieve a snug fit, and to do so, a gloss nail polish top coat will be used. This was my first attempt at using this technique, and the results were fantastic. To make sure the arm peg fits into the socket well, I applied one base layer of gloss clear nail polish, followed by a larger bead in order to thicken the peg sufficiently. I let each layer dry before applying the next. To get a good amount of nail polish on the peg, i.e. the bead, I dipped my brush, scraped off the side on the edge of the bottle, and then applied a generous glob to the peg, using the brush to spread it around the area as evenly as possible. Next, we will have to attach the arms, but also adjust them to be the proper length that is typically seen on this lanky Star Wars alien species. I marked off what I thought would be an appropriate amount of the forearm with a Sharpie. Then carefully using an X-Acto knife, I simply sliced off the excess plastic. This would provide a nice flat surface where we could apply glue and then attach the arm to the figure. This surgical procedure was also conducted to both of the legs, removing the original Trandoshan feet. Although I had to use a slice of the original shin to ensure the legs would be even and properly balanced. A combination of Crazy and Gorilla Glue will be used to adhere these 3D printed parts to the figure. Additionally, safety pins will be used to initially drill into the hard resin, and once a small hole has been made, dip the tip of the safety pin into some Gorilla Glue. Next, using a pair of pliers, force the safety pin into the arm, getting it in as far as possible and ensuring it's locked in place. This is definitely a bit tricky due to the strength of the resin. The next step will be cutting the safety pin down to a reasonable length that will allow it to act as a support peg when the two parts are glued into place, but not cause any interference with the ball joint at the elbow. Once marked to the correct length, cut the safety pin with the pliers. Next, drill the base of the forearm, apply some Gorilla Glue to the new peg, and some Crazy Glue to both of the end pieces. Lastly, line up the two sections, apply some force, and the safety pin should slide into place, combining these two pieces. All in all, this surgical method has been really effective and worked very well for me so far. Repeat the same process of drilling and cutting safety pins down to size for both of the lower legs, ensuring the ball joint's range of motion. Once everything is operated on and glued back together, the final product should result in these distinct alien characters. Naturally, I wanted to manage my time wisely, therefore I worked on this separate Ithorian figure as well. After allowing some proper dry time overnight, this custom is really starting to take shape and is ready for the next step, paint. I will be using a series of fine points and small brushes when painting this custom. Additionally, some acrylic paints from the art store will be used as well. Burnt umber and burnt sienna will be used for the body, while cadmium yellow and brilliant yellow green will provide a nice color for the eyes. The base color for the body will be the darker burnt umber paint with a small dash of burnt sienna mixed in. Something like a 60-40 ratio works well. I then applied a hint of yellow to add some richness to the color and bring it all together. Dipped a small brush into the water to add some moisture and then dry it off on a paper towel. Remember that we only need it to be damp, otherwise the paint will not go on well. Apply the paint mixture generously to the bare 3D printed parts. Since these parts have a lot of texture to them, there's some flexibility when applying globs of paint and keeping everything even. Just always remember to clean off your brush regularly. Use the fine point brush for areas that require lots of detail and a steady hand. To smooth out the surgical scars and leftover Trandoshan leg, I will be applying some generous portions of Mod Podge to the figure. Not only will this thicken up the areas where the seams are still visible, but it will further seal and strengthen the limbs as well. Mod Podge dries relatively quickly and leaves a clear finish. Therefore, you will be able to apply paint to these areas in question shortly after it is dry and have no issues in doing so. Using some Gorilla Tack and a cooking skewer will allow us to paint the head with greater ease and reduce any smears. Apply the paint mixture to all areas of the head sculpt, ensuring full coverage. For hard to reach areas that have lots of detail, use a smaller fine point brush. Once the top has been allowed to dry, finish the underside as well. After full coverage has been achieved, we can move on to the voice box. To successfully paint this area of the head sculpt, I used my go-to tool, the silver paint marker. This is absolutely the best covering silver paint I can recommend. A steady hand combined with direct applications and some dry brushing really worked well. Carefully using the paint marker to cover the majority of the flat surfaces was a smooth process. I then used a dry brush to drag the excess silver paint onto the smaller corners, cracks, and detailed areas. This was as seamless as it gets. Of course, I then used some brown touch-up paint to address any areas with overspill. Moving on, I would need to address the elbows where a yellow paint match was needed. I mixed some cadmium yellow and white paint to create a nice pale color, but also added burnt sienna to add some richness to this pastel color and achieve the closest match. I then applied a solid coat of paint to both of the elbows and allowed plenty of dry time. Next, I wanted to add a wash to the entire figure, dirtying it up and adding some nice grime throughout. To do this, I will use my go-to mixture of burnt umber, chromium green oxide, and black paint. Once mixed, I added a generous portion of water to create the wash. Apply the wash to the figure, then using a dry brush technique, work the paint into the cracks in detailed areas. Repeat the process, adding the wash to all areas of the flight suit, and then working it in with the dry brush. Don't be afraid if you're adding too much. Remember, the dirtier the better in Star Wars. I then applied some wash to the voice box to give it a more used look and applied black paint to the speaker box as well. Carrying on, I wanted to add a dry brushing of a lighter color to really accent and bring out the details of the alien skin. To do this, I used a darker yellow oxide mixed with some burnt sienna. I then lightly dabbed my brush several times into the mixture, but still keeping the brush fairly clean. You won't need much of this paint color since it's only meant to highlight and accent areas of the legs. For the arms, I recommend using the same color, but watered down. By using a wash and dry brushing on these areas, we can apply the paint color but still keep the smooth look of the arms. Moving on, I wanted to add some final details to the head sculpt. I went ahead and applied a nice rusty wash and dry brushing to finish off the weathered appearance of the voice box. Lastly, I needed to add some paint to the small light details on the box, and to do so, I used a fine point of a cooking skewer. I gently dipped the point into some red paint and simply used it to poke the red color onto the light. This requires a steady hand, but has proven very effective in my experience. I then mixed some brilliant yellow-green and yellow oxide paint to create what I felt was a nice vibrant eye color. Painting eyes is pretty challenging, therefore I opted to tape off the area and see if this was a practical approach. The blue tape method was an excellent way to lightly add the green color and reduce any major issues. Once the paint was applied, I used a fine point brush to address any areas that needed touch-up. I then used a cooking skewer to apply a black dot, finishing off the eyes. This turned out really well in my opinion. I painted the scarf from the Vintage Collection quill a nice army green color and naturally applied a wash to dirty it up. I also applied a wash to a pistol holster from Marauders and then used crazy glue to attach it to the figure, giving this bounty hunter a little extra firepower. At last, everything is complete and we can finally assemble this custom. I then added the scarf, a small amount of gorilla tack, and attached the head to the figure. A wonderful new addition to our scum and villainy. I hope you've enjoyed this video and taking a look at these new custom figures. Be sure to drop a like on this video, remember to subscribe, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments down below. Thanks everyone, and may the Force be with you.